Welcome back to another episode of Christmas at the Farmhouse. So over the next couple of weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, I will be posting different portions of my home. Also make sure to subscribe and hit that notification button if you want to be notified of any of the future episodes I have at Christmas at the Farmhouse. Today I'm focused on my kitchen, baking center, dining table, and cocoa bar. I might split them up into a couple different episodes, so if you're following along at the Christmas at the Farmhouse mini-series, then you want to go and watch the rest of the episodes on my playlist on my channel. But for now, I've compiled a bunch of stuff. I've got a few different areas piled up, kind of a theme going on. It's definitely going to be vintage, antique, and farmhouse inspired, so if that is your kind of thing, then go ahead and stick around and let's get started. I decided to start with the window over my sink, and I often put my rustic metal nativity in this window, so I'd already gathered that. I mostly do the same thing every year with the layout of this nativity set, but I will often change the things around it. I use these metal trees because they kind of went with the rustic look of the nativity set, and I put them in each corner. Sometimes I'll change them out for snowy trees, but this one I really liked. So here I'm just going to go ahead and get them all in place. I love at night how it's silhouetted by the dark outside, and it's just a really pretty set in a window. I then stole some branches from my mantle. If you haven't seen that video, you can go back and watch that. I'll put it in the description box below. I had really only used these branches temporarily because my garland that I ordered hadn't come, which it has come by the way, and I'm going to do another video with small Christmas touches throughout my farmhouse, and I will include that update in that. I normally stuff this windowsill with these branches, but I wanted to save a few for my garland, which I'll show you in a minute. I'm really just keeping this simple by adding some texture. I had a eucalyptus garland up there already. It felt a little sparse, so I decided to add some branches to mix in with it to tie into a garland that I had put over my baking center. I'll show you that shortly. I saved a few branches that matched the ones I used in the windowsill, and then I had some really cheap ones, but they really work to add some texture in this. I don't think you're going to notice the lack of quality when it's in the window, so you can let me know what you think when I'm done. I then alternated the more expensive ones with the cheaper ones throughout the garland, kind of running in the same way that the eucalyptus ran. Sometimes combining high-end and low-end stuff, you can kind of get away with it. I then took some of the ornament hangers and I just used those as little twist ties to attach them to the original garland. I made sure to kind of wrap the eucalyptus around the other branches to make it look natural, like it was all one piece. Then I finished it off with this little battery pack of snowflake lights. Now let's go ahead and hang this back up. I think you can tell that it's a whole lot fuller and it just looks more expensive over the window, even though I used some very inexpensive pieces to make this. I'm really pleased with how it turned out, and now for the lights. Now one last touch in the window before I move on to another area. We had attempted to make orange slices on our own. They didn't turn out well. I overdid them and burnt them, so we opted for these that my mom had purchased last year. They are not real, but they have cute little cinnamon sticks and berries on them, and they'll last forever. And if you haven't seen my previous video where I sung the praises of this Gorilla Putty, oh my goodness, I've been using it all over my house. It is removable, it's made for hanging art. I just used it to stick these behind the garland and it was perfect. These were a pack of red beads that we ordered thinking they would look like berries. Clearly the quantity was way off and it wasn't what we expected, so I'm gonna have to order something that looks like cranberries for inside these glass votives. Anyway, moving on to another section of my kitchen. Since you can see the wreath behind this section, I went ahead and included that in this video. This vintage Santa is really loud and obnoxious. If you walk by, it's like a motion sensor, but it's been in our family forever. It's kind of a joke, so I put it in the middle of this wreath just for fun. Next, this little corner is right next to the window and it often collects junk. I'm working on that. But I have this old coffee grinder filled with greenery, these little vintage antique looking birds, this old bell tree, and a candle. I'm keeping this simple because it is kind of a transition area and right by the sink, so just enough to add some Christmas to it. Now moving on to the island. I had this red and white table runner that I thought would be pretty as the base for what I was using. I ended up realizing it was way too long. Scrap that idea and let's try this one instead. I actually like the pop of red better, and it was a little long as well, but I just folded down the sides. I'll probably steam those or iron those later, but for now we're just gonna go with it. Added this card tree in the center, which, does anybody still get cards? We don't, but I love the look of this tree anyway. A couple ceramic candlesticks, trying to balance white on both sides by adding this ice skate vase. Next, I've got this little green cookie jar, and I'm going to add some green on the opposite side as well. Again, when I'm doing design stuff like this, when I'm doing decorating like this, I often just try to balance color, size, height, and so on. Now for the focal point of this are these little deer. I got these at Walmart. I'll try to link them below if they're still available, but they're so sweet, have a very vintage old feel to them, and they work well with this whole setup. Again, with a really inexpensive picks, I tried to just stuff them in there a little bit haphazard, hoping they'd look more full because they're really flat, but they worked out okay. It was all I had left. Now, it did feel like it was heavier on the left than the right. I don't know if you can see that as well. So here I'm playing with just moving stuff around to try to get the balance because I did like the colors on both sides. But then I opted to swap the large deer for the small deer. I feel like that's what it needed, and it was the perfect balance. Now moving on to this little corner. This corner is kind of a waste of space. I don't really have a purpose for it, so I always like to have a little decor here. I'm starting with this really old picnic basket and then adding some art to the right and a old cookie jar, an antique lantern, some greenery, and then for a little bit more charm, I'm going to add this vintage pitcher and these little wood candy canes. One more little detail with these red birds. And then right next to it, I have these cup hooks where our coffee bar used to be. I need to take these down, but for now I'm going to hang these vintage Santa Claus mugs on there, and I think they're perfect. I had actually never used those Santa Claus mugs, and they had a 29-cent price sticker on them from a thrift store, which is crazy that anything was 29 cents. Times have changed. If you saw my cookie collab with a bunch of other YouTubers, you may have seen me redo a little bit of my baking center, but because it is in my kitchen, I'm going to include a little bit of this just as a reminder where you can see how I tied in the garland and the orange slices. I use this baking center a lot. I definitely wanted it to be more functional than pretty, but I also like to add a little Christmas to it as well. I added "It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year" sign, a couple little gingerbread tea light holders, and some other little vintage pieces, just enough to add some Christmas charm to this. Last but not least, I'm going to add the oranges to tie in the other side of the kitchen. This is probably not the safest way to do this, so please do not try this at home. I hope you enjoyed episode 3 of Christmas at the Farmhouse, and we'll see you next time. Also, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification button if you want to be notified of any of the future episodes I have at Christmas at the Farmhouse.